Welcome to Postscript. Here we hope to answer your questions and help you dig deeper into the messages and sermons at Faithbridge by talking with the teacher of the day.
Hi, and welcome to Postscript. I'm Luann Riley, Grow Group and Discipleship Director, and I'm here with Bible teacher Ben Stuart, who just brought a message on community. Welcome, Ben.
Thanks.
So glad to have you back. Thanks
Yeah.
for coming in and updating us on your family in Atlanta. You're moved.
Yeah,
All
we are.
in,
We're
settled in and
Yeah.
good. Well, we love having you back today, and what a great, timely message with everything that's happening and going on, and just looking at our culture and how that does affect us. And one of the things you talked a lot about was just this growing individualism of people. And so one of the questions that came in was around that. In terms of individualism and sense of entitlement, it seems like as parents, we're just fighting against this tide or this flood of culture. How can we fight against that as parents with our children? How can we try to shift our children against the culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you know, it's I'm going to have to speak a little hypothetically because my kids are little bitty and we're just entering into this with them. But that's something Donna and I have talked about. Of we don't just want to communicate to our kids. Hypothetically, one should be engaged in community. We wanted them to see that in our lives. So we are constantly inviting couples from the church into our home. We are getting involved in serving projects out in the city with our kids. So we just recently were involved in a project in Atlanta where we were able to go help and did like this barbecue for this apartment area and brought our kids, and they were great conversation starters, because little kids are adorable. And we just want our kids in that rhythm of we step outside our home to serve other people. And as a pastor, you got to balance that where you don't then suddenly have no time where you're just listening to them, but we have time socially with just our family, just our kids, but we want a rhythm where they see it's normal to serve. It's normal to give, whether that be on a Sunday morning at a church building or in the community through initiatives the church is doing. We wanted our kids to be see that as a normal part of life and get an exposure, a broader circle than just maybe our home could give them. So that's maybe a simple thing I could say.
Seeing them seeing you live it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and them being a part of it in appropriate ways, bringing them into it as well.
Bringing them into it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so one of the questions that we had come around, it's a long situation, but what it boils down to really is you talked a lot about the heart behind diversity and unification and how the gospel calls us to reach across borders and banks. What then is a practical step? As you feel moved by the Holy Spirit, engaged to be an ambassador in reconciliation, what's a practical step?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot we could say, but I'll just say one thing. One of the most fascinating things to me in Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is talking about loving your neighbor and even loving your enemy, but then he says, greet. Don't just greet your friend, and you're like, that's so interesting that he takes this massive thing of loving your enemies and puts it down on the simple act of greeting someone. He really does funnel it all down. But when you start to think about that, what do? I greet my friends, and everybody else, I just walk right on by you, and I greet my friends, And so I would just say, rather than go, suddenly you have to be out and involved in all these organizations, I would say, begin to pray now and say, Lord, let me be aware of the world around me, and let me initiate kindness. And not necessarily go, I got to suddenly become friends with someone who doesn't look like me, but just say, I want to be a source of life, and the way to do that is to greet people, just to be kind to them. And so that's anything simple from frequenting the same restaurant and looking people in the eye and saying hello to them will suddenly build a relationship between you and someone that probably lives a very different world than you. And then it may extend beyond to further conversation, but all conversations start with a greeting. Yeah. And I found for me in life, I'm more naturally introverted. I'm not the guy running around the room trying to shake everybody's hand. But I pray that, Lord, help me when I'm in a room, be present. And as I've done that, the Spirit of God moves us towards community, it's a diverse community, and you start to find, like in a time of racial tension now, I found, Lord, thank you that, a couple of years ago, I realized I don't know anybody that's not white, and that really doesn't feel right. And, but I'm not going to suddenly start chasing down every Black or Hispanic person I see. But I started praying for that, and I was kind to people. And God naturally looped things around, and I'd say, hey, I'd love to go to lunch and ask you questions, or in a moment like this, go, hey, how do you see this? When you read that article, what comes to mind for you? And engaging people, but it starts with a greeting. Again, that sounds simple, but maybe that's the best place to start.
And I love what you said about the lack of empathy, because truly, when you engage with people and you begin to hear their story, God just opens your eyes and your heart to so many people's different backgrounds and how they've grown. And I think that's one of the great things about grow groups, is getting to hear people's stories and see where they came from. Such a good message. Now, you mentioned a book that everyone wants to know the title to, by John Perkins.
Yes.
And we did look that up.
What was the name of the book?
It was called My Brother.
He is my brother?
He is my brother.
He is my brother.
He is my brother.
Yes.
He is my brother, and I did find it on Amazon. So you can purchase it there.
So absolutely. And John Perkins is... he has a number of great resources, and so you can listen to him speak or read some of his books, but the one specifically I referenced is He's My Brother.
Great. Awesome. Yeah. Well, great message, but we can't wait to have you back again.
Thanks. Looking
next
forward to
week,
myself.
2 weeks in a row. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us here for Postscript as well. We'll see you back next week.
Thanks for joining us for Postscript. Help us keep the podcast interactive by submitting your questions during the morning services. Learn more at faithbridge.org/postscript.